of court as he halted the deportation process.
Ayan, tingnan mo lang ang ganda ng parang niya. Nakalagay loko po. Nakaraw sa kura nakakuha ka na. Ako nakakuha na ako loko sa kura. Nakukunin ko na yan na parang level 3. Kung may binupo sa gitna, nakukunin. Ayun yung ano? Project. Happy birthday, Titi. Handa nila to you. Buntik ng kabayo. Titi nila.
Of course, technical to everything that American traditions were supposed to be. Read what's on the Statue of Liberty. We're supposed to be accepting. This is also enforcing the rule of law, which this administration has a lot of trouble with. And then finally, my favorite part is just the badass part when the judge said, turn the plane around.
I know, it was pretty awesome.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And ring the bell. Ring it out on YouTube. TYT in the palm of your hand. Our TYT app is available for download in the Play Store. Just go to tyt.com/app to find out more.
Donald Trump is ending this trade war, and his more recent target has been Turkey. Through a tweet, he informed the American public that he has increased the tariffs on Turkish aluminum and steel. He wrote the following: I have just authorized a doubling of tariffs on steel and aluminum with respect to Turkey as their currency. The Turkish lira slides rapidly downward against our very strong dollar. Aluminum will now be 20% and steel 50%. Our relations with Turkey are not good at this time.
Okay, so I just want to say one irrelevant thing before Nomi tells us the important stuff. Okay, so he always used the word strong, and it's hilarious. And we were just talking off here about how when he got out of Vietnam because of the blisters that he theoretically had, he said, I got a very strong line of democracy in the posters. Why is that very strong? In fact, wouldn't it be the exact opposite? It's a weakness that prevented you from going to war. How can the letter be strong?
Very strong weakness.
Right.
The strongest weaknesses.
So in this case, a strong dollar actually does mean something. There is a strong dollar. It might be the only time he's ever used it appropriately.
Yeah.
Just my random comment.
Also, kind of like proper nouns. Can we just make sure we know what a proper noun is and what to capitalize and what not to capitalize?
No.
Okay.
He did capitalize the A in aluminum in one of the last sentences. So
For no reason.
For no reason.
And dollar. Capital D dollar.
So basically, here's the thing. We obviously he's invoked these tariffs on steel and aluminum and other things. Randomly, he invoked them, then he sort of exempted places like Canada, and then he unexempted them. He's sort of been all over the place. Like he has a bad moment, a bad day, bad hair day, whatever, and he goes forward with this. So with respect to Turkey, he's doubled steel tariffs on Turkey. Now, what does that mean? That means that Turkey, who is actually, and this is a fun fact about Turkey, they export to us what comprises 6% of our steel imports. So basically, they're number 6 on the list. There's Canada's number 1, and not too far behind is Turkey. So doing this actually does hurt Turkey. But more than that, it hurts producers of steel everywhere. It hurts users of steel here in the United States as well. So for example, if you were a company that needs steel to go and build your bridge, all of a sudden, just because there is a higher tariff on one component of your steel transport into the United States, it means all of the steel prices get squeezed up. And that means that your plan to build that bridge has to be rethought, because now your expenses are higher. And the workers that were to get involved, maybe you don't need as many, or maybe you don't do the entire project to begin with. So there's a knock-on effect for workers in the United States. There's a knock-on effect, which there was this morning in the markets, through all of the banks, basically, in Europe and in the U.S., because all of a sudden, yes, the lira, as the president correctly pointed out, which was already down by 36% this year relative to the dollar before he did this, went down another 12 to 14%, settled down 10%. That meant a lot of money came out of Turkey, which it could use for other things. It also meant a lot of banks with exposure to Turkey got hit. And what that means is markets get hit. And what that means is people that own K-money in markets and so forth get hit. So the knock-on effect of one little tweet economically was to erase potentially a lot of jobs, a lot of value. And just because the United States can't negotiate with Turkey for the release of the pasture.
So we don't need steel though, because we're going to build our bridges out of coal. So
Very clean coal.
That's
Like,
right.
you're gonna wash
Clean
it.
it, we're gonna build bridges out of it.
Right.
Okay, but I have a question for you, and I've been trying to figure this out on my own, and you're more of an expert on this than I am. So, when do tariffs make sense? Because I do think that it's a nuanced issue. I think that in some cases tariffs might make sense. The way that Trump is doing it is, of course, nonsensical. But when would you say that it would make sense to use tariffs?
Well, it might make sense in the use of the real National Security Act, which he's just been bantering about to do whatever he feels like. And I mean, in a situation where there is a danger, it makes sense to stop it or to impose a tariff because it presents a danger. And steel is not dangerous. And so that, but for the most part, in this economy, it doesn't make a lot of sense. There are tariffs and there are subsidies. You can subsidize a component of your workers or of your farmers or so forth by the government to ensure that they, can make their next, a year, that their crops, that were hurt by weather, have the potential to carry them through for another year and so forth. There's ways to subsidize, but to create tariffs in a sort of malicious way, which is how he is using the tariffs, simply incurs uncertainty on every level in every country. It incurs uncertainty immediately. It's not like a tariff that will, it's not a year it goes on. It's like immediately it chokes companies, it chokes workers potentially. So it isn't good to be used right now.
And there was one national security threat, and that was ZTE. And that's ironically the one company that Trump actually helped to get back into the American market. All the intelligence agencies were saying don't do that with telecommunications company in China. And finally, there is what he says and there's the reality. So he called Canada a national security threat. How preposterous to do tariffs. In this case, is it really because the lira went down? Or is there some other political dynamic behind the scenes to punish Turkey for something they didn't like and using the lira as an excuse? That is far more likely, but we don't yet know what the real reason is that he's attacking this particular country.
The lira going down is not a national security risk to the United States.
Of course, maybe to Turkey it is, but it isn't to the U.S.
It completely isn't. So conflating all of those things basically means he forgot the reason why he's even able to unilaterally do this and not go through Congress.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos. story. I want to show you how you can start protecting yourself on the web for 77% off just by going to nordvpn.com/TYT and by using the code TYT. NordVPN is the only VPN service to receive a perfect score from PCMag and allows 6 devices to be protected simultaneously. Browse the web with no limits and take 77% off when you sign up at nordvpn.com/TYT or use the code TYT.
We have perhaps moved one tiny judicial step away from modern debtor prisons, and that is thanks to a court ruling concerning the actions of the Orleans Parish Criminal District Court, which had instituted what should be something from the dark reaches of American history. U.S. District Judge Sarah S. Vance ruled that the 14th Amendment prohibits jailing criminal defendants who are unable to pay court-ordered fees and fines without giving them a chance to plead poverty. Vance found that the parish we were talking about has a practice of issuing fees while ignoring criminal defendants' financial states and jailing them when they fail to pay. So an OPCDC, that's the parish judge, named in the suit, estimated that 95% of criminal convicts in the parish cannot afford an attorney, putting them at risk for being jailed upon failure to pay. And for reasons we'll get into in just a little bit, they seem fully aware of the consequences of this policy that they're setting up, how they will personally benefit from it, and how obviously the poorest among us will end up in jail. Where, by the way, if you're the sort of person that can't afford to pay for an attorney or for your fines and fees, you are least prepared to spend extra time in jail, probably losing your job, maybe losing your apartment if you have a business. You'd be losing that as well.
Yeah. And not only that, I remember back in AJ Plus we did a whole breakdown of this, and it's just insane, right? So they call it actually offender-funded justice. So not only is it people who are not able to pay for their, let's say it's a parking ticket, or let's say they were driving without a license or expired or whatever, then not only is it like everything's piling on top, so like the fees increase, but at the point where you have to, let's say, do like a drug test, or you have to even spend a night in prison, or wear an ankle bracelet, or have it done, like all of these different tests, you pay for that. Actually, the people who are being fined, the so-called prisoners, are then further in debt, and it's just this horrible debt spiral. And there are, on top of that, probation companies, like privatized probation companies. Everyone's just making a killing off of the 14th Amendment not being like. And then another Supreme Court ruling in '83 that doubled down on that. So this is a huge benefit. I mean, but we're talking 40 states have debtor-funded justice or federal.
Yeah, so Vance has ruled now, changing the policy, that now judges who directly benefit from fees cannot order payment or determine who's unable to pay. They had the fees were being collected each year, put into this big fund, and then the judges were using that for benefits, paying for staff and things like that, which is just about the sickest thing I could imagine.
Such an open conflict of interest.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can't quite believe what we're saying, let me just be clear. The judge says, okay, you have to pay fines, and those fines go towards not just the staff salaries, but to extra benefits for the judge, which of course gives them an incentive to put more fines and fees, and also gives them an incentive to imprison you so that there's more consequences for you not paying those fines and fees that go straight into sometimes literally his pocket. I mean, you can't find a bigger conflict of interest. So this ruling is really important, and I hope that it gets upheld, and it does follow Supreme Court precedent. They were using a loophole to try to get around it, and so that leads to two more things about this that's really important. I have to confess that I had a little bit of privilege here. So, for a long time, I was very poor as a struggling talk show host, etc. But my family's okay. It's the upper middle class. They're not rich, but we lived in a nice suburb off in New York, etc. And we never had, if I went to prison, I never had to worry whether my dad was going to bail me out or not. He'd find a way to bail me out. And so I never understood enough to what degree we put poor people in prison for being poor.
Yep.
So, and there's a couple of different ways that you do that. One is bail. So if you're rich or middle class, you have enough money for bail, and you're free to go until your trial. If you're poor, you sit in prison even though you haven't been convicted. So that's an absolute outrage, and that needs to be reformed. It's because it's not about the crime. It's about whether you are poor or rich. That's the only reason why you're in jail. Because if the crime was bad enough, they'd say you can't get bail, or you're in danger, or you're a flight risk, right? That's
went down the mountain, he's on your left, on your right.
So that kind of oppression of the poor and some middle class.
Like micro
guilty to things that they're not guilty of because they can't afford to sit in like dirt.
Against the pedophile rings. And then it starts to get weird. Republicans, please help me. Help me help you. Help me help you. Because like it or not, we are family, and you are like a brother to me. A sick, alcoholic brother who's lost his fucking mind. For fuck's sake, I like you people better when you were just religious nuts. I mean it. Can we have the old religion back? Church is full of horrible, ridiculous ideas, but it's better than Reddit. I mean, really? The man they think is combating pedophilia is this guy?
I've said that if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her. She's 6 feet tall. She's got the best body. Well, I was going to say sex, but I can't relate that.
But wait. Remember what the dear leader keeps telling us.
What you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
Not what's happening. Not what's happening. Not what's happening.